In this video, we take our previous example where we are combining Python and Flask and WT forms and our the requests library and the Nobel-Prize API. And so we had created an interface that allows the user to choose a category and a year and find information for the Nobel Prize winners that year using the Nobel Prize API. And here we're adding the notion of a session and cookie to it. So we are going to, the session is going to allow us, while the browser is up, to remember what has been selected. We're going to just do it for the category. And the same thing for a cookie. And we're going to have a cookie where we don't set any time limit, which is going to make it very short-lived. And it will sort of last only as long as the session does, sort of as long as the browser's up, but then die. And then a cookie which we give a time to, and so long as it's within, and I think I have it set to like 2 days or something like that. So that is going to live. So here is the form page. Gives you a choice to choose the category and the year and hit the enter button. And we have no session. I sort of, killed it all and restarted the server. And so there was nothing here in terms of session. Of course, we've just sort of, I just brought up this browser, so this session just started. The category, the first cookie is terms of life is about the same as session, so it is lost. But the second category, I have been interacting with this for within the last 2 days, with sort of 10 minutes ago or something. And the last category I chose was the Nobel Peace Prize. So that cookie is known. Now let's pick something different, not the default physics, not peace. Let's go with chemistry and 2012. So let's see who won the Nobel Prize for chemistry in 2012. So we go over to our handler. It knows we chose chemistry. We know we chose 2012. There were 2 winners. We have also picked up that it understands that the session variable was now set to chemistry. So the handler handed back to Python, and between moving from the form to the handler, we moved through the Python, through what handles the routing, and we set the session there. So the session was set to chemistry. So the session category is now known as chemistry. The cookies sort of lag. The cookie is more sort of a request side thing, and now the cookie was set, but we're now more on the handler side, on the response side. And so that short-lived cookie and lasts as long as the session is not established yet, because that's more of a requesting thing. And so the longer lived category is still set on peace. Okay, but if I go back, now I'm back on the sort of request side, and the session is still chemistry, and the category is the cookie is chemistry, and the category 2 is chemistry. So, and then if I choose economics and 2014 and enter, again, the session sort of updates pretty quickly. It knows it's moved on to economics. The 2 cookies are lagging a little bit. They're still on chemistry. it's economics in 2014, and I'm going to go back, and now everybody's economics, and it's also economics and 14. And this is, I'm going to use the session to set the category, but I'm going to say I don't really need to because it's just the nature of how browsers handle drop-down lists. It tends to remember if you go back so the sort of remembering what it was before is the nature of drop-down lists when you're doing an interface. Now, what do I want to do? Let me grab this and open another one. And now, so this is another browser, so it understands all the session and it understands the session. It's a new tab, but the session information and this first category cookie is all like lives while the browser lives. So they're all economics right now, but let's remember that and then kill the browser. So I should have killed the session by killing the browser and then bring it up and paste, but my server's still running and I've lost the session. I've lost the category cookie of the first type that has almost no lifetime. But the second category with a lifetime, it remembers economics. So the session is to remember sort of is very responsive both on the sort of request and response. And its job is to know what's going on currently while the browser's up. The category with the cookie with a lifetime, its job is to sort of remember what we had done previously, and it lives beyond the session. And then the short-lived cookie, I don't know. I don't have a reason for that, frankly. Okay. Well, let's see how we got where we got. Okay, so here is the app. It's handling the routing. It's also handling the API request. So here's the JSON. Here's the requests. I'm going to go through that quickly because I had a previous video on that. Here's going over to the Nobel-Prize form. We'll have a quick peek over there. All right, we have a submit field and a select field. One of the selects, drop-down selects is for the category. Here's the label, here are the choices. And then the other drop-down list is for the years. I'm using this list comprehension. So I have X in the range 2000 to 2022, and I'm turning it into a tuple of 2 strings. And so I'm making a list of tuples of 2 strings. So that's what I wanted for my year. So that's my year range. That's my choices for that and my submit button. Okay. I have a default route redirected to the form route. The form route uses get and post. It brings up that form. If it's submitted, I get the results from the form. That's going to have what the user asked for in the category and the year. I'm going to use my requests. So there are 2 sort of servers going on here. One, the client server interaction between my form and Python and Flask, and being a server, and it's sort of serving up either the form page or the handler page. But there's also the request to the API. Okay, so now we're doing the request, setting up the request to the API. We're pretending not to be Python, but to be a normal user on a browser. We are setting it. The parameters are going to be the category and the year. And then we're getting we're using the request library to go to the Nobel-Prize URL with those parameters and those headers, and then getting the information and parsing it as JSON. And now here's the session stuff. So when I have my results, the user chose a category, I'm setting a session variable with the key of category to be that. So session is going to have like this idea of key value, and the key, we're setting up a key called category, and we're making its value equal to the same thing that the category that the user chose, which is in result category. Then we're going to, we want to go over to the handler. We're responding to the form was submitted. We're responding to that. So we went over before we respond, as the server became a client to a different server, to the API server, got its answer back. We set our session. Now we don't jump right away. What we've normally been doing, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. What we've normally been doing is return render template. But we're not doing that. We have more to prepare now with the cookies and the sessions and all that. So this is out. We're going to prepare something more substantial and then return that more substantial thing. So here, make response, instead of being immediately returned, is something we create and then we're going to dress up further. So we're going to make a response, which using template. And so what used to be just return is now I'm calling the response RESP. So it knows that it's the handler, it's got a title, it's got a header, the results are from what the user filled in, and then the Nobel information from the API. Gather that all together. But before returning it, establish a cookie with that response. And the first cookie has a key and a value. So cookies, like sessions, have keys and values. But so the first cookie just had the key and the value. The second cookie I set has the key and the value and a time. And this is in seconds. So I said that there are 24 hours in a day. There are 60 minutes in an hour. There are 60 seconds in a minute, and I want 2 days. So this is me setting the life of the cookie that's going to last for 2 days. And then I send it back. So now I move on to the handler. If I'm moving to the session if I'm not a submission, that's the else. The if up here in 43 was if the form was submitted. If the form's not being submitted, I want to see if there's a session category. So I say if session.get parentheses category. If there was a category set, I'm going to set the forms default. So the forms category default to that session variable and process the form when we set a default here, as opposed to like when we first established the form over in forms. If we do a default here, we have to go through this process method. I'm showing you this for sake of like other possible interactions, but for a drop-down list, this is like overkill and unnecessary. We saw I'm doing this for category. I didn't do anything for year, and we saw that the year was remembered. If I choose literature and 2008, and I go over and then I come back, it remembers literature in 2008. Now this default stuff is to sort of to put into the drop down list to make the selected thing what was remembered in the session. But just drop down lists tend to do that based on just pure browser functionality. So this is, not all HTML elements will be handled that way. So this might come into handy for other elements. It's not really doing anything for us, but I did want to sort of say, here's what you would do. Okay. And then return, this is the form. Did anything happen in the form? Yes. So here's a label for the year, and the year, which was a drop down. There was the category above that. But down at the bottom of the page, I had some of this just session stuff. And I'm not necessarily doing a lot with it, except just displaying it. Like, do I or don't I have session and category information? So this is just saying, here's how I ask if there's a category, if there's in the session, is there a key value pair with the key session? So I ask if session category is defined, then I'm saying I know what it is. Otherwise, I'm saying it's lost. We get the cookies are different. It's request.cookies. So there is your hint that the cookies are different from the session. So the session, if you recall, when we were going back and forth between the form and the handler, the session always seemed to be up to date, whereas the cookie seemed to be sort of lagging behind, because the cookie is very much a request thing. There we see it even in the sort of in the name, the code you use to access the cookie. It's if request.cookies.get category. So if there is a cookie, then tell me what it is. Otherwise, we're going to say it's lost. And down here, I'm just doing the same thing again, except my key changed to category 2. Category 2 was the one that I gave a life of 2 days. So that one tends to be around and hang around, even if I've closed the session. Whereas the session and the first category without a lifetime, those were dying if I closed the browser. So again, one time. Right now, they're all known, and they're all known to be literature. If I copy that so I can remember it, but close the browser, open up a new browser, paste that in, go there. I don't know the session. I don't know the first category, but I know the second was literature. So it's that cookie with a lifetime that's remembered from sort of one session to the next. But it's only a request thing. So when I jump over to so right now it's what's remembered is literature. Let's change to chemistry. 2004. And I go over. The session is updated. Category still not known, and the other category is literature. So the cookie being a request thing seems to lag because that's not its purpose. Its purpose is about remembering sort of from one time to the next, close the browser, start again. That's more the purpose of a cookie. If you want to be remembering sort of what you just did in the browser a minute ago, that's probably session. Okay. And so here we are on the form, just sort of spitting out stuff. What do we remember? And if we do remember, what is it? So we can see the lagging behind of the cookie, the session being sort of more caught up. And then I do the same thing with the handler. So that code at the bottom is pretty much the same, but just saying, is there a session? Now this is how I'm doing it in Jinja. If session category is defined, but when I was in the app, it was if session.get category. So the way we ask the question is different in Python than in Jinja. So got to pay attention to where you are, and you also have to pay attention to, are you asking about sessions or about cookies, because they're also different. The session is always there. The cookie is about the request. Okay, so I'm just asking the same questions on both sides to see, just to point out the differences, that the session sort of has a meaning on sort of both the request and the response, whereas the cookie is more just a request thing, but the cookie with a life is going to live beyond the session. So you sort of get an idea of, figure out what you want and then use the right thing accordingly. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to show. Sessions and cookies. Sessions sort of remembering things on both the request and the response. Cookies, the cookie with a lifetime being more of just a request thing, but it lives after, if the session is closed, the session is sort of as long as the browser's open. So if I had, if I kept the browser open, even if I had nothing, so if I open, I have some site, and then I'm closing. Let me make sure I remember this. I close this, but the browser's open. I open a different tab, and it's remembering this stuff. So that idea of a session doesn't mean that that particular site has to be open, just that the browser's open. It's remembering the session. But if the whole browser is closed, then we're losing, we're forgetting, except for the longer term cookie, which is remembered for 2 days. Okay, that's it. That's what I wanted to show you. Thanks for your attention.